Om Jnanatimirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavansha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratshe Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasati Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, and I'm just going to repeat one more time while it's recorded because a few other devotees joined just as I began. The test will be online for this test, video camera on, but please write out your answers by hand so that you can be AFK, away from keyboard. Yeah. But so I'll send, what we'll do is we'll get into the class, I'll send the PDF. You can open it up on your computer, but then write out the answers by hand. So there's no keyboard touching. If you find a way to cheat beyond that, then all glories to your intelligence. That's my attempt. If you still find another way too, then yeah, that's in your hands. I'll trust you all. I mean, I do trust you all. I wouldn't actually have any issue with you guys using the keyboard. I just want to create something close to a closed book sort of environment is all. That's more it. I trust that at least most of you won't cheat. Okay, so let us begin then. So last week we had just about wrapped up chapter 5. We had discussed how chapter 5 is in very many ways. Again, it's not a revision of what's come before, but in very many ways it also is, especially if we go for a more shallow reading, which is unfortunately what we have to do in Bhakti-śāstrī. I said this before, I'll say it again, and I will definitely say it again later on in this course. People think Bhakti-śāstrī is when we get an in-depth look at the Bhagavad-gītā, but it's more of a shallow flow of the Bhagavad-gītā, if that makes sense. In-depth, I don't think there's any course doing it because it would take like 4 or 5 years. Maybe in Mayapur, I've seen a few in-depth courses. Okay, so we were studying chapter 5. We had discussed the sadhana for attaining liberation, and then we discussed how Krishna, he is encouraging, right? He's very encouraging. He's saying one can attain liberation soon by becoming free from anger and material desires, controlling the mind and sincerely endeavoring for perfection with self-discipline and being self-realized. Then at the end, Krishna, he shifts gears and we find something rather interesting. We find the first explicit mention of Ashtanga Yoga. Now, Ashtanga Yoga already has been discussed. However, it's been discussed implicitly. Mrugank Prabhu, would you like to share your screen? Yeah, just the, for the notes, because today's topic of the day is Ashtanga Yoga. The yoga ladder will come up because don't worry, we're never going to run away from the yoga ladder. But the yoga ladder will come up, but the main emphasis today is Ashtanga Yoga, and it will be until the end of the module, except for the very end when we come to Krishna consciousness. But Ashtanga Yoga is the big topic. This is the focus of chapter 6, and it's also the focus of the end of chapter 5. The end of chapter 5, in a similar way that the end of chapter 4 sets up chapter 5's discussion, with the contrast of renunciation and work. In the same way, the end of chapter 5 establishes the flow and structure, in fact, of chapter 6. I would say that texts 27 to 29, they're like the seed, the sutra, which all of chapter 6 just explodes open. In the same way, they say the Om, the syllable Om, it gets expanded into the I think the Brahmacharya. I forgot which Gayatri. I'm pretty sure it's the Brahmacharya, and then that Gayatri gets expanded into the Srimad Bhagavatam. In a similar way, 27 to 29, they're like these little seeds, and then they expand out into chapter 6. So, Ashtanga Yoga. Who knows what Ashtanga means?
8 limbs.
8 limbs, exactly, right. And why is it called 8 limbs? And for those of us, just so we get our pronunciation good, it's Ashta, it's the backwards one. Just for those of us who aren't familiar with the word, has little dots on the bottom.
Because it has 8 processes which are in ascending order, which allows one to transcend.
Yes, when I was little, I thought because I would see I would see all of the I'd see all the paintings of all demigods and everything with all these arms, and so I thought it was like a yoga, something to do with them. I don't know what exactly I thought, but I thought that maybe it was how you could become a demigod, or the yoga that they do, or something like that. I was actually kind of disappointed to find out it's not literally 8 arms for the practitioner. But Ashtanga, yes, there are 8 stages or processes of it. Ashtanga yoga, Ashtanga yoga is sometimes referred to as, we all know, yoga studio yoga, right? As devotees, we have a love-hate relationship with yoga studios. On the one hand, they can be very sattvic spaces. They're very spiritually inclined. On the other hand, they totally miss the point of yoga altogether, 9 out of 10 times. So yoga studios are very interesting, but Ashtanga yoga is often what the yoga studios attach themselves to, right? They will say we are practicing Ashtanga yoga. And we will touch upon that later, because they're actually not. 9 out of 10 times, the yoga studio is not practicing anything close to Ashtanga yoga. Yes, we used to rent out a yoga studio for some of the outreach here in Sydney. That makes me nostalgic, Alex. That was like 2-3 years ago. That's where Alex first started really meeting the devotees, and that's true. I'm sure Alex can testify that it had a very sattvic atmosphere there. But yeah, yoga studios. Let's put it this way: we'll have some content today for how we can situate and understand what the yoga studios are doing. And as much as I'd love to say that they are Ashtanga yogis and therefore very high up in the yoga ladder, they're kind of not. Okay, so Ashtanga yoga is today's discussion, and we'll break it down a little more as we get into the 6th chapter, but I'm just trying to flag this. Ashtanga yoga will be our focus today. Okay, so if we go now to the Gita and we go to text 27 of chapter 5, 27 to 28, sorry. I'm pretty sure they're joined in as it is. I don't have my Gita with me. I only have the Sanskrit. So I'll say the Sanskrit, and then maybe we can have Vidhi Mataji. Would you like to read out the English?
Sure, Prabhu.
Okay, there's a lot of English for you. Like, it's a long translation. Sparshan kritva bahirbahyam chakshushchaivantare bhuvoho prannapana samau kritva nasabhyantara charino yattendriya mano buddhir munir moksha parayanaha vigate cha bhaya krodho yasada mukta eva saha.
Shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the 2 eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostril, and thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence, the transcendentalist aiming at liberation becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who is always in this state is certainly liberated.
Yes, very nice. So here we are, here we hear completely. Krishna, he's described how one can attain liberation by working in Nishkama Karma Yoga. But now he's transitioning, right? And now he's transitioning to a discussion of Ashtanga Yoga. And so we hear how liberation is attained through Ashtanga Yoga, right? And so we're hearing all of these different things, right? Shutting out all external sense objects. In many ways, this reminds us of what people normally think of when we hear yoga, right? For many of us before doing this course, when we hear the word yoga, we're not thinking of doing your duty, right? We don't really think of that. We think of the yogi up in the mountains, right? And so now we're getting to a more colloquial understanding. And it's very interesting to discuss. So Krishna, he's discussed this here. Of course, you fix your the eyes between the eyebrows. That's what we often hear about the third eye, right? And all of these things are done. So while we hear this, and this will, again, because it has the two texts, be the emphasis of the 6th chapter. In text 29, we also hear, and this should be one of your memory shlokas, right? For the shloka test. It is, I'm pretty sure. Bhoktaram yagya tapasam sarva loka maheshwaram. No, this is definitely one of your memory shlokas. Okay, oh, the last paragraph, the purport is confusing. Let me go to it. While I go to it, yeah? No, please speak.
In the paragraph, in the second paragraph, Prabhupada goes through the Ashtanga process, the 8 limbs.
Yeah.
He describes the benefits and what the process involves. And then he immediately goes, in other words, Krishna consciousness is the easiest process for executing.
Let me see. Okay, yeah, so this is actually one of the most profound points. And this is why Prabhupada, he really gets away with doing what he does, with translating Buddha Yoga as Krishna consciousness and all. The central thesis, I would say, of the Bhagavad-gītā as it is not only that bhakti is independent and supreme, not only that bhakti is the fulfillment, right, of the whole purpose of yoga, not only that everyone who is already practicing bhakti yoga should just keep practicing bhakti yoga, and anyone who isn't should start. Not only is it all of that, but this is all true because bhakti yoga contains all of the other processes as well. We'll get to that more in module 2, because in module 2 we have direct discussion of bhakti yoga, and we'll hear about how sense control, keeping one's senses engaged in activity, all of the benefits of all of the karmic processes are found, karmic of all the other yogic processes are found in bhakti yoga. All of them are found there, and so much more, right? So much that is not found in the. So it's not only the bhakti yoga is the best because it gives us the greatest result, it's the easiest, etc., etc. It also quite literally includes all of the glories of all the other processes. So Prabhupada will often make this point, and this is a very complex point. I'm hoping to break this down more thoroughly, either in module 2, and not in module 3, that's too far away, but we will break this down more in module 2. Shivaram Swami has written a really nice book where he has a table and he shows each and every unique aspect of all the yogic processes and shows how the Gita mentions that in relation to bhakti as well. And then he shows all of these features of bhakti that are not mentioned in the other processes. And yeah, we'll discuss a bit more of that later. So essentially the idea is that Krishna consciousness, and we can think about this practically. I mean, I don't want to spoil the discussion for module 2, give you spoilers before we get to it. But we find this, like, what is the issue? What does Nishkama Karma Yoga provide? It provides us a way of engaging the senses, right, in a spiritual way where we're not getting more attached. Krishna consciousness does that, right? But it does so in a more deeper level. With Nishkama Karma Yoga, it's do what you should do and don't be attached and you'll be purified. In Krishna consciousness, it's do what you want to do, but do it in the service of Krishna, and then in turn, you will be satisfied, right? With meditation, right? It's like with this, where, we're focusing on our third eye and et cetera, But as we'll find in text 29, much easier than focusing on the breath is focusing on that sweet little blue boy playing a flute, right? And so we'll find all of these things fulfilled and with so much more in Krishna consciousness. Does that make sense? Okay, and something we'll bring out more when we get to module 2. If you've all made it this far, I like to say that module 2 is almost like the I don't want to say it's the reward, because module 1 is also a really rewarding study, but it's like module 2 is like what all the devotees are waiting for, you know. And then we get to start describing Bhakti and Krishna and everything very directly rather than indirectly, like it is in the first few chapters. I sometimes like to compare, it's maybe too extreme a comparison, but it's like the first 6 chapters are like the first 9 cantos of Bhagavatam, and then the middle 6 are like canto 10, right? It's a bit like that. Okay, so now we come to the next text. And what we found is Krishna, right? Krishna now, he begins to say exactly what we were hinting towards before. Actually, don't stir the shloka. I was going to say, because it's shloka memory time, who has memorized the shloka already? Mrugank Prabhu, do you want to hide the shloka away before it jogs everyone's memory? Who's memorized this one? If nobody has, then Mrugank Prabhu can show it again. Okay, let's hear the Sanskrit and the English from whoever wants to go first. Katyayani Mataji put her hand up the same time as Srikanta Sena Prabhu. I'll flip a coin. Heads, it's Katyayani.
Go Katyayani Mataji.
Oh, okay, okay.
She's...
Jai. Okay, Katyayani Mataji, and then what's the other English?
Prabhu.
Yeah.
Bhoktaram yajna tapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhridam sarvabhutanam jnatva mam shanti muchyate.
Jai. Okay, and how are we going with the English? Who can give the English a stab? Srikanta Sena Prabhu, how have you gone with the English? Yeah, English always, it's funny because we all can speak our English better than Sanskrit, but everyone's always more afraid to do the English. Also in my batch.
I can do I can use just with the Sanskrit and just word for word translate in my head and then try to figure out things. No, because learning it word for word is difficult. Yeah, no, so word for word we don't need to do, but just give the rough gist of the translation is what I'm looking for in the test. Because Prabhupada, he you can translate words in many ways. So the test is just there to see if you've remembered the way Prabhupada renders each word, if you get what I mean. So yeah, okay. Mrugank Prabhu, do you want to share it then? And we can read the English off. As I said, it's so funny, even in my Bhakti-śāstrī batch, everyone was like, oh, I'll say the Sanskrit. And then the moment the English came up, even though obviously none of us are having conversations in Sanskrit, but we're all having conversations in English, still the English is scarier. I think it's because it doesn't have meter. It's not poetry. Like, it's easy to remember things when there's rhythm to them. Okay, so Srikanta Sena Prabhu, would you like to read out the translation then? Yes, Prabhu. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries.
Jai. So here we find there's this, the Sanskrit is not explicitly devotional, but it's really, really getting close, right? We're finding here a very devotional text. And this is what chapter 6 is. When I say this is the seed for chapter 6, it very much is, because chapter 6 is going to talk about Ashtanga Yoga, and then at the end it's going to say, forget all that, just become a devotee. Okay? And so this dynamic we find at the end of chapter 5, and we'll find that all of chapter 6 just ends up being an indirect glorification of Bhakti Yoga. And by extension, by the fact that Ashtanga Yoga, when we get to the beginning of chapter 6, is situated as greater than all these other yogic processes, by extension, these whole first 6 chapters have become an indirect glorification of Bhakti. Because as I said, we've been climbing up the yoga ladder this whole time. And then at the end, we're going to hear, okay, all of these things, this is better than this is better than this. When this purifies you enough, you can do this, 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 and this. And then it'll just say Bhakti is better than all of them. So we've been climbing the yoga ladder. We're about to get to the top. We're at the second topmost rung. But what's really fun is we're going to find there's a ladder inside a ladder, and that's what chapter 6 is. So chapter 6 is going to tell us about the ladder of Ashtanga yoga. Yeah, but what is it at the end? It'll tell us that Krishna consciousness is the greatest of all of it, because what's said? This is famous. This is called the peace formula. I think Prabhupada says that in the purport. Yes, it's right there, right? This is the way to maintain peace. And what is it? Krishna is a supreme enjoyer, right? Because he's bhoktaram yagya tapasam, right? He's the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices. So everything that is given up, the beneficiary of a sacrifice is the person who enjoys the sacrifice, right? And of course, hopefully we've expanded our understanding of yagya. We're not just thinking, okay, you know, today's my son's birthday, let's smash a coconut, right? We're thinking a little more broadly, right? We're also thinking of stuff like study of Shastra, right? We're thinking of basically any time we're announcing something, right? Any act of that, and who is the beneficiary? It is Krishna. Krishna is the supreme enjoyer, right? This is so devotional. What did I say at the very beginning of this course? In the introduction, Krishna consciousness, the message of the Bhagavad-gītā is, how do I go from being a taker to being a giver? And Krishna is saying here, by realizing that I am the object of all giving, right? And I'm so sweet and beautiful, you will just want to give naturally. I am the enjoyer, you are not the enjoyer, right? And then of course, there's always the wonderful dynamic of the fact that Krishna, when he's receiving the fullness of sacrifice, he then sacrifices himself for he himself then is willing to serve the devotee. But that's a side note. Then what do we hear? Sarva loka maheshwaram. Krishna, he is of all the planets, he is the supreme Lord, right? So again, Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. Suhridam sarva bhutanam. Krishna wishes the best for all living entities, right? So now we hear, not only is he the enjoyer, not only is he the supreme Lord, but he is also the well-wisher for all living entities, right? And it's described in some commentaries. Now I can't remember if it's in Prabhupada's purport or not, but he does this by giving the knowledge of bhakti, right? Because this is the supreme well-wish, right? And then lastly, one who knows this attains peace from the pangs of material miseries, right? So one who simply knows this, right? This is bhakti. If we know these things, we are acting on the platform of bhakti yoga, right? Because we are knowing Krishna to be the ultimate beneficiary of all of our sacrifices. We trust in him as the supreme well-wisher. We have the sharanagati, the surrender, so on and so forth. So Krishna consciousness is supreme, and that is the conclusion of this chapter. We're getting so close to the top of the yoga ladder. Finally, we're really getting this idea, right? So Krishna, he's mentioned, in fact, in this chapter, chapter 5, he's mentioned, how does one attain it through nishkama karma yoga? Then we go to jnana yoga. Now he's mentioning Ashtanga yoga, and he's even mentioning bhakti yoga. And with that context, we can now go into chapter 6. So Mrugank Prabhu, if you get the notes up, with chapter 6, I'm only going to split it into 2 big parts, and then I'm going to split the first half into smaller parts. Next week, I'm going to split the next one into smaller parts. I'm just thinking it's a bit overwhelming. If I break it all down into parts now, you'll forget it all. You know what I mean? I'll just break down the parts we'll be discussing today. So very, very easily, this chapter can be split into 2 halves. Texts 1 to 32 and 33 to 47. So texts 1 to 32 are the discussion of the Ashtanga yoga ladder, I like to call it, right? We've got the yoga ladder. We also have the Ashtanga yoga ladder, right? And this is the ladder within the ladder, right? This is the ladder of how progress in Ashtanga yoga happens. Okay. Texts 33 to 47 are essentially Arjuna asks the question, which ultimately actually triggers the discussion of Bhakti Yoga. And his question is, well, all of these yogas you're describing, this Ashtanga Yoga, it's all very impractical, isn't it, right? So Arjuna asks this question, and that will really build us into Bhakti Yoga. So what is the second half? There's so many different ways to define it, but I'm just going to call it Arjuna's question, and we're going to flesh it out better when we do that part next week. So now, in discussion of this 1 to 32 that we're doing today, I think we can really split into two halves. Gita Subodhini does it, and I think they do it rather intelligently, as they do with everything, but I fully agree with the way they split it up. Text 1 to 9 talks about rather the descriptions of the different phases, if you will, of Ashtanga Yoga. So it discusses the stages of them almost abstractly, whereas text 10 to 32, they describe the practices of these stages, if that distinction makes sense, right? So 1 to 9 is almost descriptive, right? Whereas 10 to 32 is like, do this, do that. I hope most of you would have read chapter 6. We might remember these sections, right? Sit on the kusha grass, right? Have your back up straight, right? Stuff like this. So that's all 10 to 32. Uh, 32 also mentions perfection and stuff, but that's all part of it. I won't. We want brief descriptions. None of the brief descriptions are ever going to be perfect. If we describe them perfectly, we just end up reciting that section of the Gita. Okay. So, having discussed that, that's the general overview. Now let's just get into the discussion of chapter 6. As I said, we'll be going quickly, not just because I want to create some time for revision today, but also because honestly, unless you're going very in depth and comparing this to Patanjali as Yoga Sutras and stuff like that, it really is relatively self-explanatory. Like, I don't think I need to explain to everyone like what having a straight back means, if you get what I mean. So yeah, so essentially, so Krishna, he's described in the previous chapter, Nishkama Karma Yoga, he's mentioned Ashtanga Yoga, and now he's going to really elaborate on it, okay? However, we'll find something interesting. So we'll read out the first text, text 1. Who should I get to read out the English? Let me just see who's here. Vignaraj Prabhu, are you happy to read out the English after I've read out the Sanskrit? Unless Vignaraj is AWOL. Oh.
Hello?
Hello. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Anashrita Karma Phalam Karyam Karma Karoti Yaha Sassanyasi Cha Yogi Cha Na Niragnir Na Chakriyaha.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated is in the renounced order of life, and he is a true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no duty.
Thank you very much. Now, who can tell me, what does this sound like? Does this remind anyone of any other part of the Gita?
Chapter 3.
Exactly, right? Oh no, we thought we were going to escape Nishkama Karma Yoga, but don't worry, it's coming back. So Nishkama Karma Yoga, we cannot escape it, at least in these first 6 chapters. Krishna, he is making this point so strongly, right? This is a very, very important process. It is more practical and it is more relevant to most people. I do want to note that for devotees, I sometimes get worried when we teach the yoga ladder that devotees think, oh, well, I'm just going to start doing Nishkama Karma Yoga. As devotees, we have all the benefit of Nishkama Karma Yoga, and that's what we'll discuss in the second module. So when Krishna is making this point, he's making this point to people who aren't necessarily going to take up Krishna consciousness, right? It's not that we should see all of this encouragement and apply to ourselves. In the same way that we will read as we now go through this chapter, that for the Ashtanga yogi, they also should renounce nishkama karma yoga at one point, right? We must never forget that the Bhagavad-gītā is being spoken to Arjuna. What Krishna says is applicable to everyone though, because everyone is in a similar situation where they haven't really conquered their senses, right? So I'm not saying it's only applicable to Arjuna. This emphasis is important, but we should remember that this advice is still nevertheless oriented to Arjuna. Yeah. So we find this. Krishna, he is yet again emphasizing, just before he gets into Ashtanga yoga, he's emphasizing the importance, right, of nishkama karma yoga, right? And what is he saying, right? Do we understand he who lights no fire? It refers to like the Agni Hotra and all of those other hotras and sacrifices and all that are done during the day, right? These are the daily requirements for Brahminical people. And yeah, just people in general. So texts 1 to 4 very much are discussing nishkama karma yoga. Okay, so I think it's pretty straightforward there. Just one other point regarding this text is that we find something interesting, right? One who is unattached to the fruits of his works and who works as he is obligated is in the renounced order of life. And he is the true mystic, right? So we find that the sannyasi and the yogi, they are one and the same, right? And we will find why that is now in text 2. Maybe we can have Rohan Prabhu. Are you fine to read out the English? Yam sannyasam iti prahur yogam tam vidhi pandava na yasanyasta sankalpo yogi bhavati kaschana.
What is called renunciation you should know to be the same as yoga, or linking oneself with the Supreme, O son of Bandhu. For one can never become a yogi unless he renounces the desire for sense gratification.
Jai. So what's the point that's being made? What is yoga? What is sannyas, right? We find that both of them are the same, right? Because in either method, what are you having? You are having this renunciation of the desire for sense gratification. What is interesting, right? The yogi and the sannyasi, they do not live renouncing their senses, right? Nor are they renouncing their sense objects. The previous text was emphasizing, right? He who is unattached to the fruits of his work, but not only who is unattached to the fruits of his work, but he who no longer longs for them, right? So the yogi who has purified himself, he's basically at the level of the sannyasi. Does this make sense? So, so what we find is that the essence of sannyas is not renouncing or restraining the senses. This is what people will think. This is karma sannyas, not bhakti sannyas. I'm taking to sannyas, I'm taking to spiritual life, so I'm restraining the senses. But restraining the senses is not true renunciation. Renunciation is renouncing sense desire altogether. Now, this is a very, very elevated platform, and that is the point Krishna is making. Do not rush in where angels dare to tread. Right? Okay. So what's interesting, however, is now we come, and this is now we'll have to go to the notes after we read out this translation. Maybe Nitai Prabhu, would you like to read out the English?
Yeah.
Arurukshor muner yogam karma karanam uchyate yogaruddhasya tasyaiva shama karanam uchyate.
One who is in neopathy in
neophyte.
For one who is in a neophyte, in the eightfold yoga system, work is said to be the means, and for one who is already elevated in yoga, cessation of all material activities is said to be the means.
Jai, very nice. So Krishna, he's made an interesting point at the beginning. He said, even one who is a yogi, and in this sense, by yogi, we mean Ashtanga yogi, right? Even one who is an Ashtanga yogi should still act in terms of Nishkama Karma yoga, right? They should still be doing Nishkama Karma. This is the point he's made. And that's why he said a yogi and a sannyasi are one and the same, right? Why? Again, because a sannyasi, what does he do, right? He's fixed in jnana and he stops the functions of the senses, and therefore he renounces the results of actions, right? Whereas yoga does much the same. It is a mind which is not agitated by the thirst to enjoy sense objects. Ultimately, they are the same thing. However, on the lower levels of yoga or in the higher levels of yoga, this is not, well, on the lower levels, one is not necessarily there yet, right? One is not fully renounced, and therefore one has not yet extinguished that thirst. Therefore, now, if Mrugank Prabhu would like to go to the notes, we find here two levels of Ashtanga yoga. We have the yoga ruruksha, and we have the yoga ruddha. A lot of Sanskrit just to hurt our heads on a Sunday morning. So it's yoga, aruruksha. Yeah, it's a little bit. If you all have your Gitas with you, you can find it in the word for word. Yoga aruruksha is mentioned, and it's a long A. Yeah, and then we have the yoga ruddha. So A-R-U-D-H-A, long A again, and it's a retroflex D. Yeah. Okay, so these are the two stages, the two levels, if you will, of Ashtanga yoga. Aruruksha is for a beginner, and Aruddha is for the more advanced devotee. Not devotee, Ashtanga yogi, right? So if we quickly read text 4, if we quickly read text 4, we'll hear more of a description of the advanced level. Maybe we could have Mrunal Matji. Are you on the call? Yes. Yeah. I couldn't see your name on the list, but I found it. Mrunal, if you would like to read out the English after I've read the Sanskrit.
Sure, Guruji.
Yadahi nendriyarteshu nakarmasvanusajjate sarva sankalpa sannyasi yoga ruddhastadochyate.
A person is said to be elevated in yoga when, having renounced all material desires, he neither acts for sense gratification nor engages in fruitive activities. Hare Krishna.
Jai, thank you. So as we can all see, what's there on the last line? Yoga ruddhas, right? This is the word we're looking for, yoga ruddha, right? This is advanced in yoga. I don't want you to have to go through any more Sanskrit than you need to, but these are important terms. So now I think we will finally describe the 8 limbs of Ashtanga yoga, right? Because now we'll hear about the progress and the procession that is made during them. Okay, which Srikanta Sena Prabhu has a question. Mrugank Prabhu will go to the notes because I have the limbs in my notes here. So sense gratification is not the object, but I'm not sure what your question is. Can you articulate it verbally?
So Prabhu, like it says, he neither acts for sense gratification nor engages in fruitive activities. But we know that someone, like say that I do like the Hatha yoga practice, which is part of the Ashtanga process. I actually like get some like really nice sensual feeling. I get a stretch, I get all these feels. I can enjoy that, right? I don't have to feel bad about enjoying.
No, you don't. And the thing is, asanas are part of the yoga aruruksha. They're part of the beginner's practice.
Right.
Yeah, asanas. Now I'm forgetting. Baladev Vidyabhushan. I'll need to check my notes because I do want to make this point broadly when I draw out the levels. I'm pretty sure it's either dharana or dhyana that Baladev Vidyabhushan says is the advanced stage. which is like when you're intensely in meditation, just sitting down, like, you know what I mean?
Okay.
We've all seen photos, you know, the yogis with the long fingernails and everything. Like that's the level when you're what's described in 6.4. It's not like, in the yoga ladder world, I mean, in the Ashtanga yoga platform, we can think of the advanced one as being an Uttamadhikari, not a Madhyama, right? They're an Uttama in the Ashtanga process.
I see.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So there's the 8 steps or the 8 limbs or the 8 rungs, whatever we want to do, of Ashtanga yoga. I actually, look, just a full heads up, I can ask this question and I will ask this question in the closed book test. I'm just going to tell you that because it's a long list. So yeah, that can memorize this one. This is probably the hardest question that I've put in there. As I've said, it's not hard in terms of content because there are no hard questions in terms of content. It's just rote learning, okay? I'm happy with you memorize. I can't remember, Prabhupada does give the English translation of each stage in the purport, doesn't he? Or does he just give Sanskrit? Not in this purport, in the earlier one. Oh, I should know this, but I'm happy with you giving me English translations of each rung of the ladder. Give me English or give me Sanskrit, whatever you're more comfortable with. I'm not too fussed. Okay, so the 8 limbs. Who knows? What is the beginning? What is the beginning? What is the first level of Ashtanga yoga? Does anyone know? Yama.
Is it Yama problem?
Yes, it's Yama. So we have Yama, the don'ts. They're the regulations of prohibitions. I once saw an advertisement because of good old Facebook invading my privacy in every single sense of the word, invading my privacy. I get really targeted advertisements when I go on Facebook. And I once got an advertisement for a yoga studio somewhere, and they were doing a thing called beer yoga, where they drink beer and then they do yoga. And and we know that's very much a joke because there are regulations and prohibitions. Yes, Alex, that was my response as well. What? And so we know prohibitions are very important in Ashtanga yoga, right? If you are practicing Ashtanga yoga, you need to be regulated, right? Ashtanga yoga is not just a cute thing you do with your book club or something, right? It's actually a very intense process. So we have the don'ts. Yes, I love that. My favorite, I still remember, I went to one yoga studio once. Okay, so today's going to be the yoga studio roasting day. Please don't show this video to any yoga studios, otherwise they'll hate me forever. I went to one yoga studio and exactly what Srikanta Sena Prabhu said. They said, okay, so we practice Brahmacharya here. So no, I don't know if we know the concept of like a fling. That just means you sleep with one random person and then you forget about them. So as long as you know the person, when you engage illicitly with them, that's fine. That's Brahmacharya, which is very much not a Brahmacharya. Okay, so Ashtanga yoga is very it's a commitment, right? Again, even though we follow a lot of these regulations in Bhakti, it's a whole lot more. It's a whole lot more easier, right? Because you've got a whole lot of nectar to compensate for it. Ashtanga yoga is a little bit rough and austere. So I don't blame them for watering it down, is what I'm saying. If I was in their position, I would water it down too. But thankfully, I don't need to. Then we have niyama, right? This is the do's, right? Do this, don't do that. Yes, so good point, Alex, because people often hear about that, the shaivites who smoke cannabis. I was talking to one shaivite in India, and actually a lot of them don't. They're actually a minority, the ones who do. Or maybe they're not a minority. Maybe this one was just the shaivite I was talking to was upset that's about the guys who do, and so he tried to dismiss them as a minority. But it's not all of the shaivites who do that. And a lot of the ones who do that because they're intentionally breaking the rules. It's some tantra mantra sort of stuff. where the whole idea is if you see, I don't really get it, to be honest, but they'll also do stuff way more intense than cannabis. Like some of the more extreme ones will do cannibalism. That's the word I'm looking for. So yeah, it's sort of like, that's the sort of vibe they're going for when they do that. Yeah. Super wild. I mean, those are the extreme ones. And they really play into, in my opinion, they really play into like Christian missionary propaganda, where they want to show that, like, all these yogis, they're all just like Satan worshippers and stuff. Look, here's a video of one of them eating. But that's not all of them. I'm not trying to disparage shaivites. A lot of shaivites do follow all of the yamas and everything perfectly. So that wasn't me taking a jab at the shaivites. I'm just saying the ones who smoke cannabis aren't exactly, I am having a jab at them is all I'm saying. But not to all shaivites. Yeah. If any of you are interested in Ashtanga Yoga, Edwin Bryant has written in what, to my opinion, is just the most bona fide translation and commentary on it. It's fully bona fide from a Vaishnava perspective, even though it's an academic book. Edwin Bryant is his name. He had it published academically. He is a devotee himself. And it's fantastic. It's really, really good. If you're ever wanting to preach in Ashtanga yoga context at yoga studios or anything, I would read it, because he just shows, it's a really, really fantastic commentary. And the best thing is, that's not even me as a Vaishnava. Even if I take off my devotee hat, which I hate to do, and put on an academic hat, I would still recommend it. And it's still recommended among academics. He's actually just done a great service by the fact that the most academically reliable translation of the Yoga Sutras is a Vaishnava edition. So all glories to Edwin Bryant for because it's a really, really wonderfully translated book. Like, it's very in depth. That's just a little side note, just in case anyone is kind of interested in Ashtanga yoga in general, or if they want to be able to communicate better with Ashtanga yogis. Yeah, if you're in Sydney, feel free to borrow my copy, as long as you return it at some point. It was expensive. Yeah. And then, yes, Srikanta Sena Prabhu has nicely sent the 5 niyamas, so I don't need to find them in my notes because I'm currently struggling to. I've written them somewhere and they're not very apparent. And by the way, if this is information overload, as I said, oh yeah, is that an EPUB? Yeah, that's an EPUB. Yeah, I also have a PDF somewhere. I'll send it into the WhatsApp group if I find it. But the physical copy is worth getting if you ever want to get into it. Just quickly, if you're feeling overwhelmed with all these lists, you don't need to memorize all the yamas and niyamas. Just memorize the stages, okay? Yama and niyama. That's done. That you'll get a quarter of the marks for that question, okay? I'm going to give 1 mark for each one of the 8 steps. So this will be an 8-mark question, right? So just in case you get, I'm causing anxiety for the test, please, no anxiety for the test. I just want you to be able to produce either the English or the Sanskrit. Okay. So now the 3rd step, now we get to asana. And I think we'll stop at asana and then we'll have our 5-minute break. Asana is what we normally think of if you walk to the average person on the street, let's call, okay, here's Karen. She's 43 years old. She's got 2 kids. She's a nurse. That's all she's done her whole life. She's grown up in rural Australia. You ask her what yoga is, she's going to tell you stretches, right? She's going to tell you it's a way to stretch and it's a way to get fit. Here we have asanas. Asanas are the bodily exercises which we often associate with yoga in popular cultural perception. Okay, it's asana with a long, asana, right? So asanas are interesting because this is my central jab to yoga studios. Because you go to a yoga studio and they say we're doing yoga, right? But they only do asanas, and they don't even do yamas and niyamas, right? So it's like let's jump to the 3rd phase, but let's not jump any further. Thankfully, they're not jumping any further, at least in the ones that I've been to. But I remember Danodar Maharaj, he once said, doing asanas and saying you're doing yoga is like washing the pots and saying you're cooking, if that makes sense, right? The asanas in many ways are just there for bodily maintenance. They're just there for, and of course you can get, it's not just for bodily maintenance. You can have genuine like experience from them. But the asanas very much, in the same way that washing the pots, they are part of cooking. But if somebody said, I'm really, really good at cooking, he went ahead, he burnt the dal, you know, he broke all the rice, you know what I mean? Like the sabji, it was raw, right? And all of that, but he could still wash the pots. No one would say he's good at cooking, right? You'd say he's a liar, right? It's the same with that. Asanas are like washing the pots. Helps you sit down and chant Hare Krishna longer? Yes, and interestingly enough, yes, what Alex is saying, I don't know. I've thought about this before. I don't know, because they're not, I would tend to lean towards it's something related to it, but I would struggle to say a direct correlation, if you get what I mean. I don't think everything that's embodied is necessarily an asana, if you get what I mean. Like those are all embodied things, but I do think some of those things really seem to work that way. Like, especially like, because a lot of this, when you hear it, it just depends how progressive or liberal you want to take the definition. But a lot of those things do function as a similar purpose. Like a lot of it, as Srikanta Sena Prabhu mentioned, and as I was just going to come to emphasize, it helps you sit down and chant Hare Krishna longer. And that is true. And our acharyas actually mentioned this. At some points, they say that stuff like pranayama, breathing exercises and all, and asanas, they say they're useless for a devotee. And that's true. They're useless in the sense of some meditations. But insofar as it helps you chant, they're beneficial, right? And who is it? I think Baladev Vidyabhushan explicitly says this in his commentary in the Vedanta Sutra, that it helps one meditating on the Supreme Lord to sit in an asana. Do you need to do it? No, Prabhupada chanted while walking, right? Gopal Guru Goswami, when he was a little child, told Mahaprabhu he could chant while going to the bathroom, right? There are no hard and fast rules, but they're definitely hard and fast helps. And yeah, so just as a little side point, but it often does come up. Okay, we finished discussing asanas. Let's go for our 5-minute break. I'll see you all at 10 past. But yeah, just to reiterate that point to Alex, I think they would. Some would count as asanas, some wouldn't. I would struggle to make a blanket, you know what I mean, yes or no to any of them. I'm not too confident about the swirling, but to me, when you know, if you sit down and you're sitting in a posture that assists meditation, in a very broad sense, that would be an asana. I couldn't see why not. Yeah.
Prabhu, actually, there's you know, there's people who every day they're not even knowing, but they're doing asanas.
Yeah.
Like female or people who carry babies on one side, they're doing tadasana in a different way. And there's different sort of, people are doing it without even knowing.
Yeah, exactly, right? And because they are so, how do I put it? They are so universal, like they work, right? People stumble upon them because they work, right? And so that's why, yeah, I would definitely say some of them are asanas, but I can't blanketly say that every meditation technique used in the broader religious worlds is an asana, if you get what I mean. So sorry, Alex, to give you the most yes and no answer, but yeah. Okay, well, we'll pause the recording. I'll see you all at 11 past 11. Hare Krishna. This is a totally marginal point. But interestingly enough, when you read the Sanskrit of text 4, it says Sarva Sankalpa Sannyasi, right? He doesn't say Sarva Karma Sannyasi. So he's still able, he's given up the desire for the works, not necessarily works. So when we say that he can renounce works, and he is qualified to, the Yoga Ruddha can give up Nishkama Karma Yoga. He doesn't need to, right? It's only that he's got the qualification to. You could still be at the highest level of Ashtanga yoga and still engage in Nishkama Karma yoga for the same reason that we find outlined in the second half of chapter 3, which is, just quick revision, what is the second reason given in chapter 3 for why one would do Nishkama Karma yoga? Who can tell me? Srimati, yes, Alex has got it. To set a good example. Perfectly, exactly, right? To set a good example. So the Nishkama, the Yogarudha, the advanced devotee, I'm just going to say advanced and beginner from now on because they're real mouthfuls, Sanskrit words. The advanced yogi can still, right? He is sarva sankalpa sannyasa, right? He's renounced, he is transcended all desire. He is not sarva karma, right? So he's still able to do Nishkama Karma yoga. He just doesn't need to. We finally found someone Krishna will not recommend, Nishkama Karma yoga to be necessary for, right? But he still can do it, as Alex has nicely told us, to set a good example, as we found in chapter 3, right? So in many ways, just to give you an idea of how interconnected the Bhagavad-gītā is, we could apply the logic of chapter 3 to these two stages of Ashtanga yoga, right? The beginner stage is the first half of chapter 3, right? You're not qualified, your senses aren't restrained. So, you get what I'm saying, right? You have to do Nishkama Karma yoga in order to cull the desire. But even once that desire is gone, you can still do it in order to establish a good example. Okay, let's keep going. Pranayama is the 4th level. This is breathing exercises.
Probably don't read that. That's just an answer to Katyani or Srinivas Prabhu's question.
Yeah. Willpower. Yeah. That's what I thought, but I wasn't 100% sure that by truthfulness it means you are determined not to lie. So it's implied to be more of a restriction. Because I think the question was, why is truthfulness being mentioned in the do nots? But yeah, that was my understanding as well, that it's an implied do not lie. But yeah, no, as I said, I studied the Yoga Sutras like when I was in high school, like forever ago. So it's all like a hazy mix in the back of my head. So pranayama, I like the breath control stuff. Just for the sake of time, I won't go into much more detail than that, right? But yeah, these are breath control. Then we have pratyahara, which is 5th. Pratyahara is now withdrawing the senses from the sense objects, right? So pranayama is almost a little bit like when we see like Buddhist meditations, like vipassana and zazen. I don't know how many of you know different Buddhist meditations, but it's a bit like that, right? You're just sort of controlling the breath and you're focused in on the breath, right? Pratyahara now is the senses. It's a bit like in chapter 2, the turtle, right? Like how the tortoise pulls all the limbs inside its shell. Now the senses are being withdrawn. Once the senses have been withdrawn, now we have 6. And this is why, by the way, Ashtanga yoga is mentioned in relation to Paramatma. Because Ashtanga yoga actually requires, in order to be successful, meditation on the Paramatma. And we have that in dharana. Dharana is the final beginner stage. And that is to fix the mind on the Lord's form. So now they're meditating on that, and Srila Prabhupada, he mentions in the purports, maybe some of you will remember from your reading, he mentions that Paramatma form, 4 arms holding the flower. What's the flower called? The lotus flower, right? So fixing the mind on the Lord's form, on the Paramatma form, okay? This is the final beginner stage. So this is still the aruruksha, right? This is still the beginner. This is still the person who should be also engaging in nishkama karma yoga. So I'm going to go as deep as I can into chapter 6, and then I'm going to give at least 20 minutes of revision at the end. So at 11:40, we'll go for another 20 minutes. And then at 11:40, I'll split you into groups, and you can all work through the closed book questions together, just to boost your confidence and all. Not just to boost your confidence, also so you know the answers, right? Okay. And then you also all get to know each other a bit better. I feel like some of us don't know each other too well. Okay.
Wait, we're not doing 7 and 8?
No, we are. I mean, in 20 minutes, we're going to do that. I'm just flagging that in people's minds.
Okay.
So I'm going to go as deep into chapter 6 as I can, which hopefully will be until then. No, so we're doing 7 and 8 now. So 7 now is dhyana. Dhyana is, many scholars think, where we get the word Zen from. Because we get the word Zen from the Chinese word, and I'm going to butcher the Mandarin, but anyways, they didn't pronounce it like Mandarin people pronounce it now. This was medieval Chinese, or even older than medieval Chinese. It was Chan. Chan was how they pronounced it. And the Japanese couldn't pronounce Chan, so they pronounced it as Zen. But many think that Chan was the Chinese mispronunciation of Dhyan. When you hear them next to each other, you can see how that happens, right? So dhyana, this is now intensified meditation on the Lord. And this now is the advanced stage. This person, if they want to, can now renounce nishkama karma yoga. Do they need to? No. Because again, they are sankalpa sannyasa, not karma sannyasa. And then we have the final level, everyone's favorite. We've already discussed it, samadhi. Complete absorption. And I'll let Mrugank write this point. Okay, so these texts take a while because we're discussing all 8. Okay, so again, if you're getting scared, this would be the hardest question that's going to be in the closed book test, is to list all 8. I do think they're important to know. If for anything, if somebody talks about the Bhagavad-gītā 9 out of 10 times, they want to start talking about yoga. And then 8 is samadhi, complete absorption, completely absorbed in the meditation. So when people say hatha yoga, that's the more physical stuff, like asanas. And I think, I'm not sure if pranayama counts as hatha yoga now. Now I'm getting rusty, but definitely all the way up to asanas. That's all. When people talk about hatha yoga, that's what they're referring to. Okay, so I think we can keep shooting ahead then. Now let's go to text 5. Let's do 5 and 6 together. As in, I'll just say the Sanskrit for 5 and then for 6, and then I'll just read the English for 7 to 9, just for time's sake. But who should I get to read? Shivam, would you like to read out the English for text 5?
Yep.
Uddharedatmanatmanam natmanam avasadayet atmaiva hyatmano bandhurat. No. Atmaiva hyatmano bandhuratmaiva ripuratmanaha.
One must deliver himself with the help of his mind and not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well.
Jai. Just as a quick note, I don't want to focus on it too much. But the word atma here refers to mind, not to soul. This can be very confusing, but what to do. Sanskrit is what it is. Atma can refer to the mind, it can refer to the intelligence, and it can also refer to the soul. Generally, when we use the word Atma, we refer to the soul, but this is an example where it refers to the mind. I don't know any commentator who has it refer to the soul. To be fair, I haven't read many other commentators in recent times with that question. But yeah, so here it means the mind. Contextually, it would be very weird if it means the soul. I can't think of any philosophy where that just wouldn't be absurd, to think one must deliver himself with the help of his soul, because all Vedic thinkers identify oneself with the soul, right? You know, I mean, you are your soul. So anyways, so let's just quickly go on to text 6. And then maybe let's have Divyansh. Divyansh, would you like to read out the English?
Yeah, sure. Srikanta got kicked out of the Zoom room.
How?
I don't know.
Oh,
You can't invite
he's
him.
back. He's back. Bandhur atmatmanastasya yenatmaivatmana jitaha anatmanastu shatrutve vartetatmaiva shatruvat.
For him who has conquered his mind, for him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy.
Well, this is a very relatable text, I'm sure. I'm sure we've all experienced this. Why is Krishna saying this? Krishna, he's mentioning this because he's saying that he's talking about why it is so important to do nishkama karma yoga. Because Arjuna at this point is saying, why can't I, a bit like the Beer yoga people, right? I'll just skip ahead, right? And Krishna here, he's emphasizing why you don't skip ahead, why you do need to have all of these senses purified, why you do need to have this discipline. For him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. It reminds me of Saint Paul. He writes, well, what I want to do, I do not do, and what I do not want to do, I do do. That is my condition, right? And that's very much the case, right? When the mind is not conquered, the mind is our very, very bad enemy. But once the mind is conquered, once we do have control over the mind, right? Then the mind is the greatest friend because it facilitates so very much. So Krishna, he's saying this to make the point that the mind must be conquered. And when we say conquered, that's maybe aggressive language, but I'm sure we get what we're talking about. It's about having the mind act as a friend, right? Not as an enemy to our plans, so that we can end up doing what we want to do and not doing what we do not want to do. Yeah. So this is why Krishna has spoken that. Now for texts 7 to 9, having been given the reasoning for why it must be controlled, we simply hear a description of the person at the advanced stage of yoga, right? I don't want to focus on it too much, as important as it is. As I said, Bhakti-śāstrī is not the Bhagavad-gītā in depth, unfortunately. So maybe we can have, who's here? Oh, Sri, would you like to read out, Mrugank, if you can just get the English for 7 to 9. Sri, if you'd just like to read out the English for 7 to
9. For one who has conquered the mind, the supersoul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. Text 8. A person is said to be established in self-realization is called a yogi when he is fully satisfied by virtue of acquired knowledge and realization. Such a person is situated in transcendence and is self-controlled. He sees everything, whether it be pebbles, stones, or gold, as the same. Text 9. A person is considered still further advanced when he regards honest well-wishers, affectionate benefactors, the neutral, mediators, the envious, friends and enemies, the pious and the sinners, all with an equal mind.
Jai. Thank you very much. So these are very famous texts. And they're very much building on what we were discussing before. Remember, he who sees the dog and the dog eater to be the same, right? Obviously, this is not impersonalism. I'm sure none of us would have even read it that way. This is talking about the equality with which the Ashtanga yogi perceives the world, right? And how can any of us, well, I know me, if I see gold on the road, I'm not going to treat it the same as pebbles, right? But it reminds me of, this is maybe revealing how conditioned a soul I am. But I still remember when I was in Mayapur, I saw, I forgot who the sannyasi was. He was one of the Russian sannyasis. And he had been gifted, because you know how sannyasis are, right? They get gifted a lot of their clothes, right? So he was wearing these expensive Ralph Lauren socks, and they were saffron. And he was going around without shoes, and he was just walking around, and the socks were getting all dirty and everything because, you know, it was in Mayapur, right? And his socks were just getting all this dust, and I was getting horrified. I was thinking, Maharaj, those are such expensive socks. don't let the dust get all over them. But I think that would be an example, right? For him, he didn't really care, you know what I mean? Expensive socks, cheap socks, they're all the same, right? Pebbles, stones are gold, right? At least that's where I still remember. Then I remember reflecting on that and thinking, you know, well, I get anxiety whenever I get new shoes. Oh no, I don't want to get the rain on them. Oh no, I don't want to get any mud on them. And here he is with these expensive branded socks, and he's just no, they weren't Ralph. There was something expensive because I remember seeing them in Australia before I went there. They weren't Ralph Lauren. There was something much pricier than that. They were expensive socks. Somebody clearly had decided to give a nice gift to Maharaj. Yes, Saint Srimad. Yeah, Saint Laurent. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Anyways, all that to say, that was a practical example, which I saw. It still sticks out to me because I was thinking, yeah, I still remember being so horrified, and then I realized I'm very much not on this level of equality. However, this is how the Ashtanga yogi sees things, right? But the Bhakti yogi sees something much deeper, in fact, because the off-white and orange, yeah. The Ashtanga yogi, when he sees these all the same, and he sees things not for him to exploit. But you know what the Bhakti yogi sees? The Bhakti yogi sees pebbles, and he sees how they can be used in Krishna service. The Bhakti yogi sees stones, and he sees how they can be used in Krishna service. The Ashtanga yogi sees gold, and he sees it just the same as a rock. The Bhakti yogi sees gold and thinks, oh, how can this be used to please Krishna? Do we see the distinction between the two? Right? So this is a very elevated state of mind and very worshipable, and we can all aspire to it. But Krishna consciousness pushes even before them, even beyond that. And then what do we hear? Because again, the Yoga Rudha, the highest stage, which we're hearing described here, is on two levels. It's not the highest level, it's the highest of the levels. So even more advanced. And this is the highest level, right? Very, very difficult level. If one sees all people, the well-wisher, the sinner, the pious, all of them, if he sees all of them with an equal mind, this is the furthest and highest level of advancement. And how very difficult it is, right? This is the level of advancement which we can, we've already heard it discussed before, so I won't discuss it much more. But the Ashtanga yogi, he sees this, and what does he think? He sees the super soul in all their hearts, and he sees that we're all going through the same sort of thing, right? We're all having this very intense human experience, and we're all responding to it in different ways. But he's able to see this equality, right? By perceiving the super soul in his heart, he perceives it in everyone else's heart, and he sees that everyone else's actions are simply the results of their previous actions. And therefore, sometimes people who haven't studied Vedic thought, they'll say, oh, you people, you believe in reincarnation. That means if somebody's suffering. Yeah, Uttamadhikaris perceive this similarly, yeah. Like an Uttamadhikari. Obviously, an Uttamadhikari is at a higher level than the Ashtanga yogi. But yeah, it's a similar sort of vision that people will say, and they'll say, oh, you guys think that if somebody's suffering, you just say, oh, that's their karma, and you walk along, right? But they would do well to read the Bhagavad-gītā, Because in the Bhagavad-gītā, what do we hear? You know, if you see well-wishers, or if you see enemies, if you see pious and if you see sinners, you treat them all with an equal mind. It's not that you see one and you think, oh, well, this person I'll be nice to and this one I'm not nice to, right? Because you're seeing that all of these people are simply undergoing all of these reactions. And the only response we should have to all of them is compassion, right? It is an infantile and immature understanding of karma, which sees a person suffering or a person happy and just reduces it down to, oh, well, that's their karma. I'll let them reap the fruits, right? Because ultimately all of them are suffering. Until you engage in Krishna consciousness, it's all just varieties of suffering, right? Happiness in this material world just means you're suffering a little less than the person who is suffering in the material world. Anyways, so we've reached that point. Now we're going to smash through the next section. I'm not even going to read the Sanskrit, just because this coming section is very straightforward. Now we are hearing about this, how Ashtanga yoga is practiced. As I said, you see what I mean now. 1 to 9 is very theoretical. These are the different levels. These are what they're called, etc., etc. Now, what do those levels actually look at? And the reason why I'm going to go quickly through this is it's relatively irrelevant to us. It's good for us to understand, but I don't think any of us are going to take some deer skin and sit on some kusha grass and chant our 16 rounds. So it's good to study, but yeah, we have to cut our losses at some point. So text 10, Krishna's doing the iconic Krishna thing. And what is it that he does? What did he do in chapter 2? I'm just trying to get you guys to revise the flow of the Gita. What did he do in chapter 2? Does he start with the lowest level of the yoga ladder or the highest level when he begins to discuss it? Think back. If you have your notes, you can go back and think, what was the structure of chapter 2 like? Does Krishna discuss a high level or a low level?
Doesn't he go medium, low, then high?
Yes. So he goes for a relatively high and then he drops down low and then he climbs up again. But I wouldn't even say it's medium. I think he starts with medium high. Or you know what I mean? Like a high medium. But yeah. So we find Krishna does the same thing. Krishna likes to set the goal and then talk about how to reach it. So text 10 is an example of the Yoga Rudha stage, right? He's talking about, but the reason why this is considered a different section is now we're talking about practices. How do they practice this Ashtanga yoga? And in 10, we hear about the practices of the highest stage. And what is it? Yogi yunjita satatam, right? He's always engaging his body, mind, and self in samadhi, in absorbance, right? So we're hearing about the highest level here. And he lives alone in a secluded place. Again, this is not good advice for devotees. We do not live alone in secluded places. Devotion is shared and it is celebrated with the other devotees in community, right? There is no point where we advance so much in bhakti that we go to a cave and chant our rounds, right? We always want to be chanting our rounds in the presence of the devotees. How can we do kirtan alone, right? I mean, we can do it, but does it even compare to kirtan together? No. So we have to see some of these things are good, but some of them aren't very relevant to us as devotees. Bhakti yoga is a social yoga, right? That's not to say that introverts can't practice it, but it's still done with other people, right? Always carefully controlling the mind and free from all desires and possessiveness. So this is the practice, right, of the highest levels. Taran Prabhu, is there a question?
Yes, Prabhu. Prabhu, being secluded, I sometimes feel being alone for a period of time, it helps me. In the time, like the fact that I can think it over what I am studying or what may come to my mind, and I find it very difficult to do that when I'm always with people. Yeah,
that's a good point. I'm not saying that devotees, I mean, even when we chant japa, right? Even if we're chanting japa with others, it's still a very solitary thing. It's not to say that you don't go alone, right? The point is that you don't seclude yourself. You're not cutting yourself off. Even if you have alone time, you're still having alone time in context of the devotional community. Do you get what I'm saying? So you're to fully divorce yourself from the association of the devotees is just, I don't want to say it's not an option, but you can't progress spiritually, but you can be on your own, if that makes sense. But I'm just saying the broader context of your spiritual life is in the association of devotees. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes, Prabhu, I was thinking more along the lines, like on Ekadashi or 1 or 2 days, you just disappear. You just cut off yourself off a couple of days, just do the manan, and then you come back.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing particularly wrong with that. But again, right, you're coming back, right? You're still sharing your experiences with the devotees. Like even some devotees, they'll sit down and they'll just chant for a day, right? That's not very. I'm not meaning this hyper literally that we should always be like standing next to a devotee, if you get what I mean. But I'm saying your spiritual life is being lived out in the context of devotees. You're not at one point saying, okay, well, now I'm just going to go in a cave and chant my rounds and then go back to Godhead. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah. And even then, in one sense, we are secluded. But it's a very mystical one. If you want to go deeper into it, there's a class called Living Alone in the Crowd by Madhavananda Prabhu. It's a seminar he gives on this topic about social isolation, not social isolation, that's too heavy, but what it means to be isolated, secluded as a devotee. Because in many ways we were in the world, but not of the world, right? So in one sense, this is practical to devotees, but we need to take a deeper interpretation of it rather than a more literal one. Okay, I'm gonna smash through up until text 17. Just so we've made some headway, and then I'm going to break us off into groups so we can do some revision for the test. Okay? If that sounds good to everyone. Unless you don't want to do revision, I'm more than happy to just keep on going with chapter 6. I just feel like revising together, you tend to learn better, if that makes sense. Yeah. Okay, so let's just go really quickly, and once we get to text 17, because again, as I said, all of this stuff is pretty straightforward. So Krishna, he started with the highest, and now he comes rapidly down to the basic practices. And what are they, right? One should go to a secluded place, lay kusha grass on the ground, and then cover it with deer skin and a soft cloth. Again, like all power if you want to do this, but you don't need to. The seat should be neither too high nor too low and should be situated in a sacred place. This is interesting because it affects your breathing. If it's too high or too low, and it'll affect your posture. That's in my understanding, that's the main reason for too high, too low. The yogi should then sit very firmly and practice yoga to purify the heart by controlling his mind, senses, and activities and fixing the mind on one point. As we can see here, these are basic practices, right? He's purifying the mind, so on and so forth. Okay? So far, so good. Let's keep going. So then, I think Patanjali, if I remember correctly, he actually says that that the asana not only should be too high, too low, it should actually be not too firm and not too soft. If I remember correctly, something like that. And one should own their own asana. That's another thing I remember. Anyway, so we keep on going. We hear the mind should be fixed on one point, so on and so forth. And then one should hold one's body, neck, and head erect in a straight line and stare steadily at the tip of the nose. I actually recommend this for chanting. This is good for chanting your rounds, right? It gets you in a nice mindset for you to focus on your rounds. Thus, with an unagitated, subdued mind, devoid of fear, completely free from sex life, nobody tell the yoga studios that, one should meditate upon me within the heart and make me the ultimate goal of life. Again, we can apply this to Krishna consciousness, but this is very much a meditation on the Paramatma. Thus, practicing constant control of the body, mind, and activities, the mystic transcendentalist, his mind regulated, attains the kingdom of God. If I remember correctly, Prabhupada normally translates the word nirvana as the kingdom of God. So when Prabhupada says kingdom of God, he means nirvana, or the abode of Krishna. by cessation of material existence. So we find here, text 15 is very important because here we find, again, jabbing at the yoga studios, this is the purpose of yoga. And Prabhupada makes this point. If somebody says, I'm doing yoga to be healthy, you're not doing yoga. If somebody says, I'm doing yoga in order to read minds or know the future or whatever, you're not doing yoga, right? If somebody says, I'm doing yoga to whatever, unless you are doing it in order to attain the kingdom of Krishna, the abode of Krishna, you are not doing yoga. This is the purpose of the yogic process. Does this make sense? People say today, oh, I'm doing yoga to get healthy. I'm doing yoga to do this. I'm doing yoga to do that. And, you know, knock yourself out. I'm not going to discourage you, but that's not actually yoga. The whole purpose of yoga is in text 15. Maybe you can write that in the notes, Mrugank. I know I said I'd shoot through, but I think this is important to keep noted. Text 15 is the purpose of yoga. Yoga is done for this. And actually, each one of the parts has its own traps. To come to Srikanta Sena Prabhu's point that he was making regarding bhakti yoga fulfilling everything, when we do karma yoga, what is the trap? The trap is, oh, I might start actually enjoying the fruits of my work, right? I might start working and think, hey, you know what? I don't mind money. There's the trap, right? And then boom, we're taken off the path. With jnana yoga, we might think, hey, I don't mind feeling one with everything. I like this realization, you know, I like having this, I love self-realization. Having realized the self, I'm satisfied with this. Boom, gone, off the path, right? With Ashtanga yoga, it could be that you really enjoy that feeling of the siddhis, right? The Zen Buddhists, they call them the caves, because at one point you become so advanced on the path, you see all of these cool things. You have such mastery of yourself. You've mastered yourself so well that you sort of think, hey, this is cool, you know what I mean? And then boom, you've walked into one of the caves on the path and you've been knocked off. Only bhakti is safe. Because what is bhakti's reward? Oh, I get to hear more about Krishna. Oh, I get to love Krishna more, right? I'm loving Krishna, I'm serving Krishna. What is my reward? Oh, I get to love him more. I get to serve him more. Bhakti is safe, right? If we're doing anyabhilashita shunyam, right? If we're doing pure bhakti, at least. If we're doing mixed bhakti, then lo and behold, all the traps are there again. Okay? So, yes, we can discuss that in the questions, Alex, because I feel like it is relevant, but I'm just going to get to text 17 because I do want to discuss it, actually. That would be a really good analogy, I think. Yeah, so because of this, there's all of these traps, right? And yeah, and Prabhupada, if you read the purport, he is really heavy on it, right? He just says, you're not a yogi. Stop lying, stop pretending, right? You're not a yogi if you're saying these things. Okay, then 16 to 17, we get the classic. There's no possibility of one's becoming a yogi, O Arjuna, if one eats too much or eats too little, sleeps too much or does not sleep enough. Obviously, if any of you have eaten too much or eaten too little, you know how hard it is to focus. Good luck being an Ashtanga yogi if you can't focus. Sleeps too much or does not sleep enough, same thing, right? You oversleep, you're groggy, right? Straightforward. Just before we now wrap this section up, I just want to share a pastime of Brahmananda Prabhu. Brahmananda Prabhu, as Indians would say, he was very healthy, right? So he was rather large. And he was a dear, dear disciple of Srila Prabhupada. It would often be said, they would say he was Srila Prabhupada's son because Prabhupada was so affectionate to him. He would treat him like his own son, right? And so Brahmananda, being relatively large, he would say, I am half of a perfect yogi. I definitely don't eat too little. And I think as devotees, we can relate to that as well. Technically, we can eat too much prasadam. So this does actually refer to us. If we eat too much prasadam, we're technically doing sensual gratification because we're no longer honoring the prasad, where we're just doing it to eat. But you know what? There's worse things you can do than overeat prasadam. So I won't discourage you, or at least I'm consoling myself by saying that because I definitely overeat prasadam. Okay, and then we get to the final point. He who is regulated in his habits of eating, sleeping, recreation, and work can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga systems. I have a storehouse of prasadam. I sure do. There's a never-ending pit. It's a sacrificial fire, and I'm just throwing all the prasadam I can into it. He was regulating his habits of eating, sleeping, and recreation and work can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. Ashtanga yoga is very regulated. Krishna consciousness is also very regulated, but we regulate things by satisfying all the desires rather than restraining them, right? This is the distinction. Okay, so on that note, 18 to 23, they do keep on going, but they describe the practice of the person on the perfectional level. So I think this is a very good cutting off point. I did say you'd have 20 minutes. We'll go until 12. I'm just going to make the groups now because I think it's very straightforward. I'm going to pause the recording. I'm just going to resume the recording. Feel free to leave. The homework is practice your shlokas. Like, I'm not giving you anything else. Please practice your shlokas. Like, and I'm not saying that because like you'll all pass, but it's just so stressful practicing it the night before. Like, except for like the none of us who is fluent in Sanskrit here, I don't think anyone can. Like, it's just difficult, right? Even if you know basic Sanskrit, like I know basic Sanskrit, and it just wasn't fun. Even memorizing just the English, right, which we are all fluent in, it's just a bit difficult, right? So yeah, please memorize your shlokas. That's your homework. Practice your closed book exam. Write down any questions you're not sure about.
Probably up to what verse are we memorizing?
So all of them,
including chapter 9.
Chapter 6.
Whoa! No, not chapter 9. Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
You're going to give everyone a heart attack. We're gonna next week we're gonna have half the Bhakti-śāstrī classes. Everyone's just passed away. No, you're gonna kill us all. Even
12 verses.
No, just the first 6 chapters of shlokas. So all of them, I am going to assess all of them from the first 6 chapters.
So Prabhu, what's the date for the shloka test? So 24th we know is the closed
Okay,
book.
so the shloka test, I'm just going to message you all individually. That's how they did it when I did it in Mayapur Institute. So I'm gonna do it over 3 days on the weekend. I'm gonna do it over 3 days during the weekdays, if that's all right with you guys. Like, I'm sure you'll be able to spare like 10 minutes on one of the weekdays of the coming week. So of the week following the test, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So I'm just going to line up a time with any of you who can do any of those days, right? And then we'll individually Zoom. We'll just set aside the time. That's how they did it when I did it. Because if I do it all in one day, I'm gonna, like, it's not, it's just too much, right? So yeah, I'm gonna assess it over 3 days. I'm gonna message you guys, and unless you've got a severe clash, like, I'd prefer if you just say yes. Even if I give you Tuesday, like 2 days, honestly, in the grand scheme of things, 2 days isn't going to help you give you a massive advantage. You know what I mean? Like, you've known the shloks for like quite a few months now. So I don't feel, not known them, you've known about them. I feel like most of you are still yet to know them. But yeah, no, you've known about them for a few months now. Like, I don't feel like I'm giving an unfair advantage if one person gets assessed a day later. You know what I mean? So I would prefer it if you'd say yes, but obviously if you say, sorry, I've got work, or, it's my child's graduation or whatever, you've got something big on, obviously we'll move it around. But it would be my preference if everyone just says yes, if that makes sense. Like, unless you've got a really, really bad clash. I'll try and do it outside of working hours. So like in between the hours of like 3 to 5 on those days. Yeah, if anyone can't do any of those times, we'll organize that independently. I'm going to write up the list soon so that you can clear up the time. I'm thinking this Wednesday I have a presentation for uni, so I'm thinking immediately after the presentation I'm going to write up the list of people, and I'll message you all individually.
So you're going to ask all of these 12?
Yeah, all of them, all shloks and all Sanskrit and English. Because everyone works New South Wales government. So 3 p.m. is COB. What's COB?
Close of business.
Oh, yeah. Jai. Well, now you can all see I'm still a student. I'm not yet in the workforce.
After 5, Prabhu.
After
when you
5?
Yeah, after 5, yeah.
Okay,
because
okay.
the work finishes at 5. So.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I'm happy to do some later. I'm just saying 3 to 5 I feel like is an ideal time for a lot, but I'm flexible. As I said, I would just, at least in terms of the day, because if I tell people you can be flexible in the day, everyone's just going to say, oh, I can't do anything. Wednesday's the best day for me. And I don't want that, because then my Wednesday is going to be terrible, like just a busy day. So anyways.
Sorry, Prabhu.
Yeah.
For me as well, it would be after 5 because I finish work at 5.
Absolutely fine. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not too worried about being flexible on the time. I'm more worried about being flexible on the day. Like, I would rather be more rigid on the day, just because I want to evenly spread you all out.
Okay.
4 or
Thank
5.
you.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And if I accidentally forget which time works for you and which time doesn't work for you, just tell me. Sorry, Prabhu. If you let me know ahead of time. So I'm going to let you all know hopefully this Wednesday.
Okay.
That's which will give you like a week and a half in advance, right? Hopefully I'll know by then. There was another message. So, and yeah, all shlokas. The shlokas is the harder part. Like the closed book test is at this point now I'm worried I'm making it seem too easy, because I'm trying, but it is relatively easy. But the shloka test, I want the Sanskrit for all of it. And I was telling one other group, my rule of thumb is when you tell me the English, I want it to be obvious that you're quoting Prabhupada's Gita. If you say in instead of on, or if you say because of instead of as, or something like that, I don't really care about that. But if you hit the main notes, right, of Prabhupada's translation, I'm happy with that. If it's recognizably Prabhupada's Bhagavad-gītā as it is, then I'm happy. But all 12. And so I'm more than happy. I will just say, okay, 2.7 is your first shlok, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I'll just say Bhagavad-gītā 2.7, I'm more than happy for you to go 2.7, finish a shlok, then the next shlok, then the next shlok, then the next shlok, like that, and just shoot them all away in order. If you need me to give you a prompt in terms of the number, I'll give you the number without any penalty. But if you need a prompt in terms of the first word, I will give you the first word with a small penalty. Not a huge penalty, but I will give a penalty if you ask for the first word.
So you're not going to ask randomly, Prabhuji?
No. I'll ask them in order. I'm cruel, but I'm not that cruel.
And the exam is on the 27th at 9. I mean, for me, it's 9 o'clock.
Oh, of course. I'm such a big fan of abolishing daylight savings. That's the most political statement you'll get out of me. I promise to stay apolitical, but the most political statement you get out of me is I think I agree. We just shouldn't have daylight savings in New South Wales. But anyways, I think the science has shown that it's really bad for health. But 27th, yes, 27th, 9 o'clock for you, 9 till 11.
Okay, thank you.
If it first doesn't do it, then free kick. No free kicks. The only free kick I'm giving is a kick out of the call, and I'll fail you. No, I'm just joking. I'm not going to be that harsh. But no. So no free kick, but it only will be a small penalty, or as Srikanta Sena Prabhu said, a handicap. It's not an instant fail. If I need to tell you the first word, don't feel like, oh no, I failed Bhakti-śāstrī. You know, how will my self-esteem ever recover? You don't need to feel like that. I'll give you the first word and you'll lose a tiny bit of the mark, right? I was telling the other group, if I give you the first word of each shlok and you then get it right, you will still pass. You won't get the most fantastic marks that have ever been earned in a shloka test, but you will still pass, even if I give you the first word for every shlok. Yes, exactly, right? Yeah. I very much agree with that on daylight savings. And what's interesting, I don't want to waste all your time, but it's interesting that on daylight savings days where we lose an hour of sleep, heart attacks increase by like 25% or something. And the nights where we gain an hour of sleep, they decrease by 25%. So you might say, oh, well, I guess it all balances out, but I'd just rather not have our hearts go through all of that stuff. I mean, it made sense when we were all farmers, but especially in New South Wales, like it's all rural, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, sorry, that's the, this is Bhakti-śāstrī, not Toshan Krishna's strong feelings about daylight savings messing up his sleep. Yeah, no, anyway, so I hope you're all feeling comfortable. I hope the tests make sense then. Once you do them, this will be breezy. We won't be discussing the tests as much as we are now. I just know everyone gets scared. They hear test and, you know, everyone wants that sense of security, okay? Yeah. So, okay, so no comment to the political messages. I am politically neutral, but they are funny. Okay, are there any other questions, any concerns? If not, we'll wrap up there. Does anyone have, if there's no other questions, then we'll wrap up. Okay. I'll see you all next week. We will finish chapter 6. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Bhagavad-gītā ki jai. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitana bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Anantakoti Vaishnava ki jai. Okay.